All right, Sauce Pot family, how you guys doing tonight? Welcome back to another episode of Sunday Sauce Pot on ItalianAmericanRadio.com, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you guys for tuning in. So tonight we've got some guests from my hometown and also from one town over, from New Haven. So anybody that's from East Haven probably heard about this story from the 1970s about a body that was found behind Bradlees. And that's what we're talking about here tonight. East Haven Jane Doe, Patricia Newsom. I'm going to introduce everybody and then we're going to dive right into it. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce retired Sergeant Tony Greigo to Sunday Sauce Pot. Tony, thank you so much to come on to the show tonight.
Thank you for having me with you. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. And then we got Captain JMurgo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Joe, thank you so much. I know how busy it is being a captain of a police department, so thank you for taking the time. And then, of course, we've got Trisha's sister, Maryann. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you being willing to help get my sister's name out there so we can get some information.
Absolutely. So who knows what happens with these little videos, you never know. So, like my mother always used to say, you don't know unless you try. So
absolutely.
That's what we're trying to do here tonight. So, like I said, in August of 1975, an unidentified female was found bound, gagged, and wrapped in a tarp behind Bradlees department store on Frontage Road in East Haven, Connecticut, 49 years ago today. So, Maryann, you want to walk us through it a little bit? What happened in 1975 with your sister?
Well,
as far as you know.
As far as I know, the last time I saw my sister was more like 1974. My sister had been sent off to school, and one day she just never came home. We were told growing up that she had run away from a boarding school, but I've been looking for a long time. Said boarding school hasn't materialized, and we're not really sure how she ended up in Connecticut. We lived in Jersey at the time, in Marlborough Township, New Jersey, a little town called Morganville. And as a kid, one day she just stopped coming home.
So let me ask you a question. So are you 100% sure that she left the boarding school, was in a boarding school?
Not at all.
Anything about the boarding school?
That's what we really need to know, is where Trisha was during this time period. Because as I said, not only myself, several other people have looked. We can't find any record of her anywhere. And
so where did that information come from that she was at a boarding school?
That came from my father's second wife, and she's not very credible.
That's what I was going to ask you. So how credible was that?
Not very.
Not very. So,
I'm pretty, at this point, with other eyes having looked as well, so it's not just me looking, and now we know that she's been found, still nothing coming up. I have no reason to believe that anything that I was told had any real relationship to the truth. I do believe she went to a school at some point. I don't know that she was missing from there. She could have gone missing from where we lived in Jersey just as easily.
So just for a shot in the dark, have you tried, Googling boarding schools in the area and contacting all the boarding schools?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And not just me. And not just in that area. We've looked all over the Northeast and are continuing to try to look. I would say it would be more, Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New York for sure. Maybe even as far as Maine, New Vermont, something like that. I'm not sure about that, but I would say the New York, Connecticut, area.
Okay, so let's go along with what the story is. She she ran away from the boarding school with with a friend, and then what happened?
They never reported her missing, and that was it.
Okay,
My
And
father divorced my stepmother not too long after my sister died, but she was never reported missing. It was just she ran away.
okay. So now, Joe, it's East Haven Jane Doe for 49 years. So how do we find out that it's Tricia Newsom?
Yep. So, the case was just one of those cases in East Haven that, really shocked the community at the time. And again, at the time, several generations of detectives did the best they could to try to identify her. But, as Maryann said, her family never put her out missing. So, when they were investigating it in the 70s and into the 80s, they thought that at some point somebody was going to come forward to report a missing person, and then they would be able to sort of work their way backwards, to learn the circumstances that led to her death. But that never happened. And as detectives, retired and passed the case on to new detectives, the case.
So let me stop you there for a second, Joe. I did some research on this case, and there was a transgender person that was in question. Are you familiar with that person? Glenn Robert Askborn.
Yep. So that was one suspect that emerged. That suspect didn't emerge until the 90s, when, he was arrested for a similar crime up in Maine. And in that crime, the victim of the crime was bound in a similar fashion to to the way Patricia was. So in the 90s, they really focused on that suspect. They, went up to the Maine prison where they were serving, a lengthy sentence for murder. And, after an interview and after doing their due diligence, that never panned out to anything. So that suspect, although it was never named not a suspect, it really didn't go anywhere.
Okay. All right. So now you're putting a name to the body.
Correct. Yeah. So, the first thing we had to do was locate her body in the State Street Cemetery. And that presented its own set of challenges, only because we knew that she was buried in an unmarked grave. We weren't exactly sure where she was buried. And that's sort of where Tony came in, because at the same time, there was Tony trying to identify her, Maryann trying to locate her. So there was parallel things taking place all at the same time, and none of the dots connected until we ultimately identified her in 2023.
So Joe, Tony, so you're part of New Haven. So how do you play into this?
Well, I was on the police department in 1975 when she was found, and I was aware of that case. And then it just kind of lapsed because being New Haven, I had no connection with East Haven. And it wasn't until 1982 that I became aware of the fact that she had been buried in an unmarked grave at the State Street Cemetery from a newspaper article that came out of the New Haven Register. Somebody interviewed the caretakers of the cemetery at the time, and one of the individuals, it was the son-in-law of the owner of the company. It was pointed out to the reporter where he believed she was buried in the rear portion of the cemetery near the gate. That came out in a newspaper article, and that's when I became aware of it. Well, but I was familiar with the State Street Cemetery because I had gone to school, and I started school in 1947 at State Street School, which was right next door. So I was familiar with the cemetery, and what the really interesting part here is, I belong to a yacht club in New Haven. And I went to one of the meetings one night, and one of the girls that was on the executive board, we got talking afterwards, and I told her, about this homicide case in East Haven. So I found out that this contact she was a nurse at Yale New Haven Hospital, Amy White. Which later on I said, gee, why don't we start working together on this? Because you're very good on the computer. So after the meeting, I went home and I've kept a journal for years. So I wrote in my journal this conversation that I had with the nurse. And I looked at the date. It was August 16th, 2016. We had this conversation on the very same date that girl was found in 1975.
How ironic is that?
I immediately got on the phone and called Amy up, and I says, wow, this is like a voice from the grave. I said, let's start working on it. So my first thing that I did was I went to the East Haven Police Department and spoke to an officer on the desk, and he told me that he thought that the case had been turned over to the state. So I started writing to the state of Connecticut. They have cold cases units in Connecticut. And I wrote to a couple of them, and they said, no, we don't have the case. And they referred me back to East Haven. So in the latter part of 2016 and early 2017, I started to write to East Haven Police Department. And at the time, one of the former officers from New Haven was now a deputy chief in East Haven. So I contacted him, and shortly thereafter, I got a letter from the town attorney, which at the time was Joseph Zullo, who basically said to me, we're not going to give you any information on this case because it's still active. And I accepted that. I know that police departments don't divulge information on active cases. So that's about where it went. And at some point I contacted not Captain Murgo, but Captain Emmerman, and I talked to him, and that I thought the case was with East Haven. Well, it wasn't a short time later, I get a call one day, and it's Captain Murgo. So I said, you're there now. I says, I'll be right there. It's only about 5 minutes away from my house. So I drove down there. I met with both captains, and I told them from the newspaper article, we believe that she was in the southern eastern part of the cemetery, right next to a chain link fence. And that's what got the ball rolling with East Haven.
So you basically knew where she was.
Well, no, I knew approximately where she was.
I mean, more than anybody else, you had a better idea than anybody else.
Well, yes. And I was there. The other part was there was a site on the computer. It's called Hamden Crime Watchers and Other Interesting Things. So when it said other interesting things, well, I posted a short synopsis of this East Haven case, and I was trying. Now the cemetery was abandoned. Nobody was taking care of it. We had no clue where the workers had disappeared to. And I posted on this Facebook page, and I got a private message from a girl. She says, well, I'm related to one of the caretakers. He's my uncle. He's living in Massachusetts, and here's his phone number. So I called him up, and I told him what was going on, and I asked him if he would come down and point out where the grave was. And he said, at the time when she was buried, he was 9 years old, but he married into the family, and his father-in-law was the caretaker of the cemetery. And one day his father-in-law had pointed out where her grave was. And he said to him, the day is going to come that East Haven will want exhume her. She's buried over there. So we then eventually got this guy to come down and through a process, which was basically the first time was unsuccessful. And East Haven actually located her body on the second try.
So now you have the body and it's still unidentified. So how do you identify it, Joe and Maryann?
Yep. So like Tony said, the first exhumation attempt was unsuccessful. The caretaker came down and did his best to try to find the exact location using a sounding rod and public burial records. But again, with the map that we had and those burial records, we still weren't able to find her on the first shot around. We came back 2 weeks later, and this is after we got some help from the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And, an employee there came down with a ground penetrating radar device, which is basically like an X-ray on wheels. And we were able to find a better location. So after, exhumation attempt number 2, we successfully located, her body. And with the help of the medical examiner's office, we were able to get some pretty good samples of DNA that we then turned over to a company called Identifinders.
When you say the DNA, what do you mean? Bone marrow?
Yep. So we took a few different body parts, a few different areas of the body, and the femur turned out to be the best source of DNA. So we were able to extract good DNA from a femur bone. And we turned that over to Identifinders International, and it took about 9 months. But I was sitting in my office one day and got a phone call from somebody from Identifinders, and they shared, the earth-shattering news at the time that our Jane Doe was in fact Patricia Newsom, and it was exciting to see that we identified her and we got a name. And when we put the name to paper, there was already a team of people that were, knee deep in trying to locate her and trying to find her. And that's how we hooked up with Maryann.
Back in the 80s, you wouldn't have been able to do this. I mean, it's the technology of today that made this happen.
Yeah, and we always said that. This case was just waiting for technology to catch up. And I'm just lucky enough to be the guy in the office at the time when technology did catch up. So not to take away from any detectives that worked on this case previously, because all of their work, mounted up as well to get to this moment. But yeah, we're lucky that DNA is just so strong and powerful now that Maryann uploaded her DNA to GEDmatch, and we submitted our DNA to Identifinders, and the two just found each other.
Okay, so we got about 6 minutes left, Maryann. So I want to get into this. Like I said, I've been doing some research on this. So now we have the identity of East Haven Jane Doe. Now we're trying to find the killer. Okay, so now I understand you have somebody in mind. Richard Cottingham, do you still have him in mind?
Well, I wrote a letter to him. Okay.
What made you think it was him?
Because some similarities, things like that. But that was kind of more of a Hail Mary than anything else. Kind of trying to look to exclude him. I mean, he's somebody that's out there, his crimes are known, and I looked through them, and there are some similarities there, enough that it made me interested. But it was pretty much just a Hail Mary kind of thing.
How long ago was it that you reached out to him?
Oh gosh, Joe, do you know? Been a while.
It was definitely over the summer. I'm not sure, Maryann, if it was July or August, but
this year. It was this year.
Oh,
yeah.
And still no reply back from him.
Like I said, I know the letter was delivered, but yeah. So it's kind of a Hail Mary thing.
Cottingham, serving multiple life sentences. He was also active in the area at the time of Patricia's death. So,
Yeah,
so,
but then when you think too about how many serial killers are working in the country at any given time, which unfortunately, when you're me, these are statistics to come into your life.
there was
I think
also, Joe, some talk about, maybe it was, mafia related. There was a book he found, 10 days before, in a river in New Haven. Cause you know, everybody that knows about East Haven and New Haven knows, mafia was running strong. back
Right.
then. So, what's your opinion on that, Joe?
Well, I mean, anything is possible. You know, we definitely aren't ruling that out. You know, I think the important part here and the reason why we're reaching out to so many people and, you know, jumping on so many podcasts is because we want to learn more about Patricia. And
Yeah.
the more we learn about her, the better we'll be able to sort of piece together some of her final moments, final days, weeks, or months. And if we're able to do that, and we're looking to talk to anybody that knew her at all, and
Absolutely.
we're having
Even
trouble.
when she was little.
So what,
Yeah.
her name was, what did she go by, Maryann? Tricia?
I always called her Trisha, okay? And her middle name, just this is important. I always pronounced it Melody because she preferred it, but it was actually pronounced Milady.
Milady. Okay.
Yes, that was the actual pronunciation of her middle name. I used to tease her a lot. Chances are somebody else in her life did at some point too.
So,
She could have gone by Trish, Trisha, Pat, Patty.
so in your memory, what was the last day that you saw her and where was it?
The last time I remember seeing her was in her bedroom, which became my bedroom. And I remember her. She had this stupid little piggy bank, like a little mouse, and I remember her telling me to save money in it and everything. And I remember telling me to just keep it for her till the next time I saw her.
So you never actually got to say goodbye. I mean, you
Oh,
didn't
no.
know, you didn't know that she was going to the boarding school.
I got to say goodbye to her when she went to school. I don't remember ever getting to say goodbye to her
Officially goodbye.
officially. I mean, it was always,
Okay.
I
Well-
always had a against her.
Well, that's, very heartbreaking. But, Joe, if somebody should have a lead, what do they do?
Yep. You know, they could reach out to me. They could reach out to me via email. My email is jmurgo@easthavenpolice.com. And that's JMURGO at easthavenpolice.com, all one word. Or they can give me a call at the PD. I'm there Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. So yeah, we're looking to talk to anybody that has ever known her in any capacity from childhood, middle school, possibly the boarding school or beyond.
Do you know the phone number to the East Haven Police Department?
Sure. It's I'll give you my direct line. It's 203-468-3824.
You're a pretty brave guy giving your personal number out on this show.
Absolutely. For this, I'll do anything. I want to talk to somebody about this for sure.
And if
All
they
right.
want to reach out to me, they can hit me up on Find Patricia Newsom at Facebook, or my email is MaryannCollette@gmail.com.
Okay. So, you know, like I said, we got a very short time left, maybe 1 minute. What do you want to say to everybody, Maryann?
Thank you. Get your DNA and GED match. It's important. But to all the people up in East Haven, all the people everywhere searching and helping, thank you.
All right. All right, Tony, what do you got to say to everybody? One
I would
final
say
word.
thank you to the East Haven Police Department for never giving up on that case.
Amen.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal that you know, at least we got identity to this East Haven Jane
incredible.
Doe. And you know,
Absolutely.
we don't have the killer, but now you know.
I got my sister back.
Right. There you go.
Yep.
All right, guys. So hopefully, you know, somebody out there knows somebody or something that could help Maryann out.
Somebody does.
Give me a
And
call.
it's all
Somebody
hinged on
does.
all these little miracles.
We just got to keep praying and just keep on keeping on. That's all we could do.
Never give up.
Never give up.
Hopefully we'll have answers soon. So
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for being on the show tonight.
appreciate
For
it.
having us.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right. And as always, who loves you, baby?
Who loves you, baby? By now you ought to know. Well, I can't always let it show.